All right, who wants to kick off the reading?
Am I the token male again? I
You
gotta stop
are.
finding myself in these situations where I'm the token.
Bill messaged me. This is his last weekend of moving, and then next weekend he does the actual move, and then he's back on. So that'll be nice.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm missing out, Bill.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to start.
Oh,
Thanks,
I was going to
Kelly.
say, let's start reading. Sorry. I'll take over after.
Oh, all right. Chapter, let's see. Close my laptop. Too much feedback. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Brilliantly.
What?
Very well.
Cool. Oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay. All right. Okay. So chapter 13, the brain, broadcasting and receiving station for thought, the 12th step towards riches. More than 20 years ago, the author working in the conjunction with the late Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, Dr. Elmer R. Yates, observed that every human brain is both a broadcasting and receiving station for the vibration of thought. Through the medium of the ether, in a fashion similar to the employed by the radio broadcasting principle, every human brain is capable of picking up vibrations of thought which are being released by other brains. In connection with the statement in the preceding paragraph, compare and consider the description of the creative imagination as outlined in the chapter on imagination. The creative imagination is the receiving set of the brain, which receives thought released by the brains of others. It is the agency of communication between one's conscious or reasoning mind and the four sources for which one may receive thought stimuli. When stimulated or stepped up to a high rate of vibration, the mind becomes more receptive to the vibration of thought, which reaches it through the ether from outside sources. This stepping up process takes place through the positive emotions or the negative emotions. Through the emotions, the vibrations of thought may be increased. Vibrations of an exceedingly high rate are the only vibration which up and carried by the ether from one brain to another. Thought is energy traveling at exceedingly high rate of vibration. Thought, which has been modified or stepped up by any of the major emotions, vibrates at a much higher rate than ordinary thought, and it is this type of thought which passes from one brain to another through the broadcasting machinery of the human brain. The emotion of sex stands at the heat of the least of human emotions as far as intensity and driving force are concerned. The brain, which has been stimulated by the emotion of sex, vibrates at a much more rapid rate than it does when that emotion is quiescent or absent. The result of sex transmutation is the increase of the vibration of thoughts to such a pitch that the creative imagination becomes highly receptive to ideas, which it picks up from the ether. On the other hand, when the brain is vibrating at a rapid rate, it not only attracts thoughts and ideas released by other brains through the medium of the ether, but it gives to one's own thoughts that feeling which is essential before those thoughts will be picked up and acted upon by one's subconscious mind. Thus, you will see that the broadcasting principle is the factor through which you mix feelings or emotion with your thoughts and pass them on to your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the seeding station of the brain, through which vibration of thought are broadcast. The creative imagination is the receiving set, through which the vibrations of thought are picked up from the ether, along with the important factors of the consciousness, of the subconsciousness, along with the important factors of the subconscious mind, the faculty of the creative imagination, which constitute the sending and receiving sets of your mental broadcasting machinery. Consider now the principle of autosuggestion, which is the medium by which you may put into operation your broadcasting station. Through the instructions described in the chapter on autosuggestion, you were definitely informed of the method by which desire may be transmuted into the monetary equivalent. Operation of your mental broadcasting station is a comparatively similar procedure. You have but three principles to bear in mind and to apply. When you wish to use your broadcasting station, the subconscious mind, creative imagination, and autosuggestion, the stimuli through which you put these three principles into action, have been described. The procedure begins with desire. Anyone else want to pick up from there?
Sure. The greatest forces are intangible. The Depression brought the world to the very borderline of understanding of the forces which are intangible and unseen. Through the ages which have passed, man has depended too much upon his physical senses and has limited his knowledge to physical things which he could see, touch, weigh, and measure. We are now entering the most marvelous of all ages, an age which will teach us something of the intangible forces of the world about us. Perhaps we shall learn as we pass through this stage that the other self is more powerful than the physical self we see when we look into a mirror. Sometimes men speak lightly of the intangibles, the things which they cannot perceive through any of their five senses. And when we hear them, it should remind us that all of us are controlled by forces which are unseen and intangible. The whole of mankind has not the power to cope with, nor to control the intangible force wrapped up in the rolling waves of the ocean. Man has not the capacity to understand the intangible force of gravity, which keeps this little earth suspended in mid-air and keeps man from falling from it, much less the power to control that force. Man is entirely subservient to the intangible force which comes with a thunderstorm, and he is just as helpless in the presence of the intangible force of electricity. Nay, he does not even know what electricity is, where it comes from, or what is its purpose. Nor is this by any means the end of man's ignorance in connection with things unseen and intangible. He does not understand the intangible force and intelligence wrapped up in the soil of the earth, the force which provides him every morsel of food he eats, every article of clothing he wears, every dollar he carries in his pockets. The dramatic story of the brain. Last but not least, man, with all of his boasted culture and education, understands little or nothing of the intangible force, the greatest of all the intangibles, of thought. He knows but little concerning the physical brain and its vast network of intricate machinery through which the power of thought is translated into its material equivalent. But he is now entering an age which shall yield enlightenment on the subject. Already, men of science have begun to turn their attention to the study of this stupendous thing called a brain. And while they are still in the kindergarten stage of their studies, they have uncovered enough knowledge to know that the central switchboard of the human brain, the number of lines which connect the brain cells one with another, equal the figure 1, followed by 15 million ciphers. Did you say it like that? Ciphers? Chippers? Ciphers? Hello?
Not
Hello?
sure. I'm not sure. But
I suddenly thought.
that sounds
I think it's ciphers.
So I just carry on.
Like, yeah, sounds good.
we can research later.
I suddenly thought everybody had gone. Okay.
If you think of linguistics, decipher means to decode or translate.
Yeah.
Good thinking.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the figure is so stupendous, said Dr. C. Judson Herrick of the University of Chicago, that astronomical figures dealing with hundreds of millions of light years become insignificant by comparison. It has been determined that there are from, 10 million, no, that's not, what's that number? So sorry.
That's
billion. 10 billion to 14 billion nerve cells in the human cerebral cortex, and we know that these are arranged in definite patterns. These arrangements are not haphazard. They are orderly, Recently developed methods of electrophysiology draw off action currents from very precisely located cells or fibers with microelectrodes, amplify them with radio tubes, and record potential differences to a millionth of a volt. It is inconceivable that such a network of intricate machinery should be in existence for the sole purpose of carrying on the physical functions incidental to growth and maintenance of the physical body. Is it not likely that the same system which gives billions of brain cells the media for communication one with another provides also the means of communication with other intangible forces? After this book had been written, just before the manuscript went to the publisher, there appeared in the New York Times an editorial showing that at least one great university and one intelligent investigator in the field of mental phenomena are carrying on an organized research through which conclusions have been reached and that parallel many of those described in this and the following chapter. The editorial briefly analyzed the work carried on by Dr. Rhine and his associates at Duke University. Viz. What is telepathy? A month ago, we cited on this page some of the remarkable... Oh, sorry, did anyone else want to read? Okay. A month ago, we cited on this page some of the remarkable results achieved by Professor Rhine and his associates in Duke University from more than 100,000 tests to determine the existence of telepathy and clairvoyance. These results were summarized in the first two articles in Harper's Magazine. In the second, which has now appeared, the author E.H. Wright attempts to summarize what has been learned or what it seems reasonable to infer regarding the exact nature of these extrasensory modes of perception. The actual existence of telepathy and clairvoyance now seems to some scientists enormously probable as the result of Rhine's experiments. Various participants were asked to name as many cards in a special pack as they could without looking at them and without other sensory access to them. About a score of men and women were discovered who could regularly name so many of the cards correctly that there was not one chance in many a million of their having done their feats by luck or accident. But how did they do them? These powers, assuming that they exist, do not seem to be sensory. There is no known organ for them. The experiments worked just as well at distances of several hundred miles as they did in the same room. These facts also dispose, in Mr. Wright's opinion, of the attempt to explain telepathy or clairvoyance through any physical theory of radiation. All known forms of radiant energy decline inversely as the square of the distance traversed. Telepathy and clairvoyance do not, but they do vary through physical causes as our other mental powers do. Contrary to widespread opinion, they do not improve when the precipitant is asleep or half asleep. On the contrary, when he is most wide awake and alert. Rhine discovered that a narcotic will invariably lower a precipitant score, while a stimulant will always send it higher. The most reliable performer apparently cannot make a good score unless he tries to do his best. One conclusion that Wright draws with some confidence is that telepathy and clairvoyance are really one and the same gift. That is, the faculty that sees a card face down on the table seems to be exactly the same one that reads a thought residing only in another mind. There are several grounds for believing this. So far, for example, the two gifts have been found in every person who enjoys either of them. In every one so far, the two have been of equal vigor, almost exactly. Screens, walls, distances have no effect at all on either. Wright advances from this conclusion to express what he puts forward as no more than the mere hunch that other extrasensory experiences, prophetic dreams, premonitions of disaster and the like may also prove to be part of the same faculty. The reader is not asked to accept any of these conclusions unless he finds it necessary, but the evidence that Rhine has piled up must remain impressive. In view of Dr. Rhine's announcement in connection with the conditions under which the mind responds to what he terms extrasensory modes of perception, I now feel privileged to add to his testimony by stating that my associates and I have discovered what we believe to be the ideal conditions under which the mind can be stimulated, so that the sixth sense described in the next chapter can be made to function in a practical way. The conditions to which I refer consist of a close working alliance between myself and 2 members of my staff. Through experimentation and practice, we have discovered how to stimulate our minds by applying the principle used in connection with the invisible counselors described in the next chapter, so that we can, by a process of blending our 3 minds into one, find the solution to a great variety of personal problems which are submitted by my clients. The procedure is very simple. We sit down at a conference table, clearly state the nature of the problem we have under consideration, then begin discussing it. Each contributes whatever thoughts may occur. The strange thing about this method of mind stimulation is that it places each participant in communication with unknown sources of knowledge, definitely outside his own experience. If you understand the principle described in the chapter on the mastermind, you of course recognize the round table procedure here described as being practical application of the mastermind. This method of the mind stimulation through harmonious discussion of definite subjects between 3 people illustrates the simplest and most practical use of the mastermind. By adopting and following a similar plan, any student of this philosophy may come into possession of the famous Carnegie formula, briefly described in the introduction. If it means nothing to you at this time, mark this page and read it again after you have finished the last chapter. The depression was a blessing in disguise. It reduced the whole world to a new starting point that gives everyone a new opportunity.
Wow, big topic.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of more recent studies on telepathy as well, with huge results. People looking at paintings or different pictures and the other person being able to explain what it actually is that they're looking at, and over great distances as well. So it's definitely a characteristic that we all have. I believe that we just haven't been taught to use it, and so it's kind of reduced in our efficiency of using it. Although we experience it on here sometimes.
Experience, why don't...
Yeah, telepathy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And receiving thoughts that are outside of our usual knowledge or
awareness.
thought processes. Yeah, awareness.
So, just out of curiosity, Nicole, would you describe what we experience here on this call as more akin to what he describes in this chapter, or more like what he describes in a formal mastermind procedure, what he calls the Carnegie formula?
I'm quite sure it's one and the same.
The two are the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Being able to receive thought and broadcast thought is basically what it comes down to.
The first time I started to read Napoleon Hill's writings, I tended to get caught up in the details, but I've got a much more open mind about how he wrote about the details, and to just be appreciative and amazed at the level of detail he was able to put down on paper, given the limited state of scientific knowledge and development 100 years ago. So where you were reading, this figure is stupendous, about 10 billion to 14 billion. Those numbers are probably not correct according to what science can prove today, but they do know that given the number of potential electrical connections in our brain, it's essentially if you took a typewriter and typed a 1 and then followed the rest of the page with zeros on every line and took 8 pages of that, the potential electrical connections in each and every one of our brains is 1 followed by zeros for 8 pages. It's more molecules in the known universe. It's a pretty big number.
And I wonder how many of those we actually use.
It's not just how many we use. It's just it's inconceivable that we can be cognitive or conscious of how many we're actually using. So one electrical connection, say a neuron, can have millions of potential electrical connections, which is a chemical signal that it releases with a small electrical charge. And it could be something as simple as my heart beats, my heart pauses, my heart beats, my heart pauses. So there's 4. So there's a lot of physiological processes that it keeps our bodies running, but there's a huge amount that science cannot possibly interpret, measure, or therefore we cannot cognitively or consciously explain or begin to understand. So another one may be something as simple as I'm interacting with another person and my olfactory senses some odor their body emits. Dogs are much more in tune to that. They can smell fear. They can smell anger. It used to amaze me in my household. The dogs would know before my ex-wife and I were about to have an argument before we would. They would get up and go downstairs before the argument even started. So they could smell things and sense things intuitively that us humans we can't possibly put our finger on. But given the state of scientific development, like your post, Nicole, on the Gates laboratory, the cutting edge research at that point in time, it's really amazing the amount of information that Napoleon Hill was able to put in here, even though technically and a lot of the detailed specifics have since either been refuted or adapted or changed as science makes progress. There's still so much that's just absolutely unknown.
Yeah. I think that it's good for us to know a little bit about the brain in the sense that we can understand our habits better, and when we learn about how the neural pathways work, like, for example, riding a bike, when you first do it, it's totally conscious. But when you've been doing it and you know how to ride your bike, it's completely unconscious. So you're not actually using thought anymore. You're using the well-worn neural pathways to ride the bike. And when we have habits or belief systems that are well-worn neural pathways in the actual physical brain, that's where we're going to be sending the message from our subconscious mind to get the things that we want. And if that's not what's programmed in there, that's what we need to work on changing. So even though most of what we talk about is spiritual and thought processes, the brain does come into a little bit there with our habitual, well-worn neural pathways that we have to actually physically change as well as mentally change.
Can I share with you something that is spoken about the brain in the Think and Grow Rich Action Guide by Hill?
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Sure. It says, like a radio or television, the human brain is capable of picking up vibrations of thought being released by other brains, not to mention from the myriad non-human sources of ideas and information to which we are constantly exposed in our fast-paced modern world. Operation of your mental broadcasting station is a fairly simple procedure. There are only 3 principles to apply which you want to use the broadcasting station: subconscious mind, the creative imagination, and autosuggestion. And there's some three questions here that are presented to be able to answer. And one is, how might you use information this program offers you about the brain to improve your mastermind group? 2, what positive effects can you envision from the use of this information? 3, what steps can you take to avoid negative influences affecting the operation of your mental broadcasting system? There you go.
So those 3, the subconscious mind, creative imagination, and auto-suggestion, are talking about our sending and receiving faculties. The auto-suggestion is in there because we need to program our subconscious mind to send out what we want it to send out. We don't really have immediate control over what we're sending out unless we program ourselves beforehand.
Being aware, yeah.
So, Nicole, what are your thoughts, not just Nicole, everybody that's on, what are your thoughts on brain training? You know, the Holosync and any form of brain stimuli that you can get to, you know, the brainwaves technology. Does anybody use them? I love them, by the way.
Now we can't say anything.
No. You need to slip it in like, well, I just, for me, I was just anything that helps me get there quicker. And there was a lot of work to do. So I just found, for me, I say I like it. I'm doing a lot of work, so which is having the effect, I don't know.
Keep doing whatever's
yeah,
working.
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would keep doing whatever's working, and if it's helping you to retrain limiting beliefs or habits that aren't useful anymore, then good.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I'm not sure if it's that, if it's studying weekly, if it's writing out my goals every day, but yeah.
And we really need to be keeping ourselves so busy with the things we want that the things we don't want don't have time to get in. So even if it's just filling a gap that's not of time, that's not allowing you to ponder on negative things that you don't want, it's even working just in that sense.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of potentially subtle negative or positive influences in our own environment. So a friend of mine moved, and I moved into his apartment, and he left most of his furniture and pictures here. When he moved down, he got his PhD and moved to a university in Atlanta. But one of the pictures happens to be one of the double-decker buses on the streets of London. And I've just recently come to realize that it's kind of a negative feng shui influence on me, that it's like wherever I sit in my living room, there's this bus aimed at me. So I generally like the picture, and I certainly enjoyed the few times I had the opportunity to work in London for a few months here and there when I was younger. I really had a great time. But I keep finding myself glancing at it out of the corner of my eye because it's a black and white picture except for the bus is red. And so I recently changed the picture to another black and white picture, which is either Paris or Amsterdam, and it's looking at a red bicycle locked up against a fence on a bridge, and you're looking straight down the river. So it could be one of the canals in Amsterdam or one of the canals in Paris. And both places I've been to and spent time working in, and I enjoyed those as well. But it's a lot more subtle because I like rivers, I like canoeing, and I like cycling. So I took the bus scene out, and it's I've kind of been just trying to be more in tune with some elements of feng shui that I don't really know much about, other than I get the sense that picture was a somewhat negative influence on my demeanor. So it's odd how our brains work. And when Nicole was sharing a few minutes ago about memory and repetition, I was thinking of peak performance. So if they study in science peak performance, they typically will study athletes because there's clear evidence of results. So it's research based. They know what to count and what to measure. But there's also this huge element, like riding a bicycle, of muscle memory. They still can't determine how much memory is in the mind or the brain, and how much of the memory is retained in the nerve pathways to the muscles, and how much memory is retained in the muscles as well. So by default, if we hear memory or we think about memory, we think about the brain. But the way our body reacts physiologically, it's not possible. There has to be some element of memory somewhere else outside the brain.
I read or heard something about that a couple of weeks ago, and it was talking about, I can't even remember who it was, but they were talking about memory is also perhaps similar to thought in that it's a frequency, and you notice sometimes that you'll be saying something and then you forget what you're about to say, or you forget the word that you need to fill in the meaning of it, and it's because you've lost that frequency. Maybe something else has come into the back of your mind and you've lost that frequency, and once you get your mind back onto that frequency of thought, you can remember the rest of what it was there. So maybe that's just another aspect of memory. But I've also heard that memory and knowledge is in every single cell of your body as well, not just the memory bank in your brain. So it's a really broad subject that I don't think any of us laymen know very much about, and even the scientific world is still struggling to make meaning out of.
They have a trial. Scientific method has advanced the overall well-being and state of life to such a huge degree, except the insistence on repeatability and research methodology hinders some growth. So a lot of the motivational aspects, science can't repeat the experiments. In terms of clairvoyance and telepathy, science cannot repeat those experiments where they're statistically significant. So they say it's foo-foo stuff because it's not repeatable, rather than trying to explore it from a different avenue or in a different light. Even like the Japanese researcher who would meditate on water, Emoto, they've tried so many different times and so many different ways to repeat that type of an experiment with rigorous scientific method, and they've been just unable to do so.
Okay, I didn't realise. I thought they were having quite good success. In fact, I watched a video the other day, and you can't believe everything you see, obviously, where some students, I think it was, were around joining hands in a circle and putting gratitude into the water, and then they were able to form a crystal from, I think it was, from their Chinese river, which isn't the most beautiful crystal clear water in the world, and they couldn't form crystals with it. But once they had given the vibration of gratitude to the water, they were able to form a crystal. That was a recent, perhaps it was a takeoff of the original.
Yeah.
I believed it to be something that they were actually had actually done.
Yes. And I guess what I was trying to get at is the scientific method and stringent requirements for the research-based repeatability to make it statistically significant hinders information and knowledge that's beneficial to us on an individual basis.
Yep, I see what you're getting at. Yep. Yeah, which is a shame, because it'd be good just to, I guess we can read the reports, can't we? If we're interested in the subject, we can go on and read what has been found, even if it's not up to their standards of being able to write a definite decision on.
And it also depends on who they are and what agenda is behind their own agenda, or who's got their research grant for their laboratory. Unfortunately, science, the way it operates, has to operate to a large degree the way politics operates in most of the industrialized world. But even in psychology and psychiatry, a lot of people don't appreciate positive psychology and positive psychiatry because it's self-reporting, so it's not quote-unquote repeatable in rigorous scientific methods. But you look at what in the 1980s, what's his name, learned optimism, Dr. Martin Seligman, who popularized positive psychology and came up with terms like learned helplessness and learned optimism, that has dramatically changed millions of individual lives. And science just says, well, it's crap because it's all self-reporting.
Yeah.
So, no, their lives are actually changed.
Yeah. And go on, Lorraine.
No, go on. I'll wait.
I was just going to say, it would be similar with this as well, since it takes an emotion to step up the vibration of thought enough both ways, to receive it and to send it out, that would be quite intangible to be able to document as well. What emotion were they really feeling that made it work, and how good the person is at being able to explain the emotion that they're in. It would be really hard to document.
I was thinking, just in general, how easy it is for us to have an opinion about things that are real or not real, things that we don't understand, but other things. So, for example, telepathy, the law of attraction, just energy. We don't, people will be like, that's rubbish, it doesn't make any sense. But they'll readily accept other things that they can't explain, like the fact that we can even think. They can't explain that, but they just accept it. They can't explain electricity, but they accept it. Do you know, it's funny because we just, we accept some things and then just rubbish others completely, or dismiss others, I should say, not rubbish it entirely, but we will be, a lot of people, including myself for a long time, would be quite dismissive of things that I didn't understand, despite the fact that I accepted other things that I couldn't understand. Do you know what I mean?
It is. I was thinking about that the other day, actually. We all know we think, but no one ever sits down really and asks themselves, well, what is a thought? Where does it come from? What does it do? Because it's the thought that stirs the nervous system to make your hand open and close, or to move, to write. Unless you're doing something subconsciously, then you're doing it without thinking. But it's the thought that tells you to stand up and walk over to the tap when you want to get a drink. But what is the thought? Where does the thought come from? It's not a physical part of us.
And it's also not something you can stop either. I got that in the book I was reading the other day. You can't just stop thinking.
No, you just have to control which ones.
Yeah.
Or choose to think a better feeling thought.
Yes.
But that's what, now that I've got that awareness, that I just feel empowered from just having that alone, that I actually know that I can choose, don't like that thought. Okay, this is happening because I'm thinking this way. Let me try and change it, or let me focus and do something that changes that thought. I'm aware that I can do that. All right, admittedly, it doesn't always work, but I'm aware that I can do that. And for years, I was walking around just accepting that life sucks, totally not thinking that actually my view of the way life is could be changed just by thinking about things differently. Like, I know that now, so I'm just empowered from that alone. And I think that's quite good.
Yeah, even before,
exactly,
because even before any physical manifestation that we purposefully, once we understand the process and we start to want to purposefully create our own physical manifestations, before even that, now I've lost my train of thought, see? It happened.
It will come back.
It will. Yeah, no, it's gone. But getting back to the emotions, like when we change our thinking, it makes us feel better and it gives us a better perception of the world, and that changes immediately. I think that's part of what I was going to say before. We even purposefully change our physical environment, the way it is already starts to change because our perception is different. And then when we start to think about our emotions as part of being able to receive inspiration to be able to then go and really dramatically change our environment, that's when it starts to get interesting. We want to change our emotions so that we feel better and have a better life, but when we can use our emotions to send the message of what we want to the universe and be able to get instructions back on what to do, that's when it gets exciting.
Yeah.
I think the brain is a wonderful, it's like the umbrella for which the nerve signals are getting and interacting with every other system in our bodies and with everything else. Kind of like the antennas of the body is likened to the antennas of the intuition, the connectedness with the ether, the unseen, seen, because like if there's any kind of damage, or even underdevelopment in the nerves, then there is more chances of weaknesses in other elements that that the brain is responsible for helping to it's like the organizer of everything.
Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, what are all your thoughts on opening channels of receptivity and open-minded acceptance of the receiving station of the mind? So it's pretty simple what he writes in chapter 2 on desire and chapter 3 on faith and creativity. I think the trusting my intuition, the creative elements that I cannot put my finger on, I cannot explain, closes off some of my acceptance of when to trust my intuition, that yes, this is the turn I'm supposed to take, rather than saying, where did that idea come from? So then I get the cognitive brain going, and it changes my vibrational frequency, as you would say, immediately, and then I lose the feeling.
Sometimes asking awareness type questions can kind of give insight, like, what is this, or who does this belong to, or what is this about? Is this a contribution to from within, or is this a contribution that I'm tuning into that isn't necessarily mine, or that is whose invitation is this? Who does it belong to? Is that or asking some kind of questions like what is the contribution to this, or what's right about this that I'm not getting? I don't know if that helps at all.
Can you give an example, Tim?
I just have a general idea that as my brain is a receiving station, maybe I have too many filters that I want to use to examine it. Even what Callie was saying is quite beneficial, but it starts the cognitive, the thinking part of my brain, which prevents the journey down to my heart, which is where it needs to be.
Yeah.
When I'm receiving something. So I guess in action, I don't intuitively trust what I'm receiving. I immediately start judging or examining it in the sense of, okay, where did that priming come from? Or if I'm even capable of feeling it. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if it could be simply a matter of what more is there to be aware of to help me to be able to decipher the difference between my logic mind and my sense of awareness? That's just an idea.
I went, well, I'm kind of at the end of, so I went through it. We always kind of go through self-doubt, but until we can get a handle on it. I won't say this forever, but that would be a bad thing to do. I also, like, when I would get ideas, I would think, maybe that's just something that I've read in the past or something that was in my subconscious mind that I'm just thinking of, and it's completely irrelevant. But the more I read, the more I'm being told to just jump in the water. You have to believe. You have to have faith. You have to just say to yourself, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I am capable. I am worthy. It must be what I'm kind of 1% think it could be. I'm just going to believe that it is. And then I just move forward with it. And the more I've done that and the more I've practiced taking at true value what ideas and thoughts are coming to me, the more I'm getting used to how it feels and the more I'm trusting them and the more I'm getting. So I would say just jump in and trust them and follow them, see what happens.
Nicole, do you ever use your tapping into what it feels like, and what does that mean? In terms of, it's kind of like, what would it feel like, if you, it's just, that's the other thing that I'm being drawn to pay more attention to too is what's being registered in the body. You know, it's kind of like that gut response. What does it bring up? You know, how does it feel? What would it be like if, you know, if I did follow through with that, or if I didn't follow through with that, what contribution would it be to my life or not be to my life?
It's kind of getting to the stage for me now when I get the hunch or the idea, I just know. It's just a clarity, like a moment of clarity. You just know.
I get that. And do you find that you then get reinforcements, like something will happen shortly afterwards once you've made that decision and you've gone with it? It gets reinforced by things.
Oh, yeah.
And someone else will say, guess what, I just had this idea and I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
That's funny enough. Or I'll read it, or I'll listen to something and it will be that exact thing, and I will have listened to it before but not heard it. And then I'll get the idea in a moment of clarity and think, oh, that's I understand that now. And then I'll just be inspired to go and listen to something and it'll confirm it. So it's like the universe is saying, here, have this idea, ponder on it a bit, and I'll throw you a couple of things just to confirm it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's exactly. I think that's what I've been. I was saying that to Callie. I was speaking to Callie earlier before the call, and she had written something to me, and I was like, wow, like this again, it's just another sign that I'm going the right way. Yay. You know, just things just happen and it just gets reinforced. So I like that. If perhaps there were no
yeah, we all need, you know, confirmations from time to time, because it's, you know, and Tim, I want to tell you, share a little bit of a story. I'll try not to make it a long one, to kind of about that. You know, it's like not being sure, you know, about the messages I'm getting, you know, I trust it or what to trust. I remember one point in time when I was going in the beginning stages of my going through an awakening of kind of waking up, and started on my inner healing journey years ago. There was a situation where I was being given some kind of insight about a change, you know, some kind of a change or some kind of a perception, a belief that kind of like, you know, because I was very logical minded, you know, it's like things, you know, I was always tended to want to jump to conclusion without realizing that that's what I was doing, or that things are a certain way or have to be a certain way. Then there were three different, it's like the universe, you know, brought three people into my life. There were different times, different stages where I connected with individuals. I was reaching out for some help, for some helpful insight, you know, some things that maybe I didn't understand that others did, that could shed some light on some situation for me. And it was so interesting to discover that these three different people that I went to, they all have different kind of methodologies or methods in which they were able to share insight, give me information that they would never have known, you know, because they didn't really know me personally, and they would not have known what the other two people that they shared a very similar message, even though it was a different way, but yet it was all coming back. It was like, oh my gosh, it's like a wake-up call. It's like, okay, there's a message here. This is meant for me. There's something about this. And so that kind of got me into a new awareness, to start to be curious instead of like, I don't know, but being curious about, you know, what else is possible. So,
so I guess what I'm gathering here is to develop that sense of knowing, as Nicole referred to it, we just kind of have to act as if, lean into it, as Jack Canfield would say, or just as Nicole said, take a little bit of it at a time and say maybe 1% of it is valid, and let's just pretend it is and see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do it anyway.
Create it. Co-create or create.
Jump in with both feet and just believe.
You know, for me, I recently, so I'm on a course, and I've recently, a lot has been happening for me, and there's a lot of fear about taking action and doing things that, you know, and I was finding myself doubting myself, is this the right path, or you know, because there's lots of ways to make money, be an entrepreneur and sort your life out, because I've got a lot of things that I need to do, and it's just so much going on. So I was finding myself procrastinating and getting a little bit like unsure and doubting the path that I was taking, and then after some time, I decided, you know what, Lorraine, just do it. Just trust yourself and just do it. I'm surrounded by people that are doing the same things that I want to do, and they're being very successful at it. You know, the method is there. Follow it, and you will be fine. Deviate from it, and you won't. So just follow the principles, and it will be fine. So I was doing that, but I shared, and everything has been going great. And so that's fantastic. But I shared on the call on Tuesday that I was finding myself recently getting a little bit competitive, and just finding that I was a bit, there's something I wasn't feeling too great about the way that I was working, and the things I was just getting success and doing well, but I just found that I was starting to feel a bit anxious. And then the competitiveness was coming into it. And so what I'm saying is sometimes you're on a path, and then you start to feel a little bit uncertain. For me, I had to look again. And I was saying to Callie today, I've just realized it's because I've decided to walk away from Facebook for a while, for example. There's course after course after course, all sorts of things trying to distract me from the path that I'm on, or creating a sense of urgency and putting that competitiveness in there. And I've just said, do you know what, Lorraine, you know, I know that what I'm doing is working, and I have faith in what I'm doing. I've had to trust myself completely that I don't need to be on the lookout constantly for something else or the next big thing. And it's not necessarily that I'm looking out for it. It's the fact that I'm in a place where it's just being thrown at me. So I needed to remove myself from that place, so I'm not seeing it and I'm not getting sucked into all of that. So now calmness has, you know, it's come back. It's resumed again, and I'm feeling a lot better. And that was, again, you know, I got confirmation in a conversation that I was having with Callie. I haven't spoken to Callie for ages. And then tonight she's saying a couple of things that just resonate. And it's like, wow, made the right choice again. So it's for me, there was some fear. I made a decision, I jumped in, and then I found myself about to be pulled out of it. Or I was pulling myself, I was getting distracted again, getting caught up. So I had to stop and say, right, okay, what's really going on here? And it was, thank you, Nicole, for Tuesday's call. It was the lack of faith in myself and the path that I was on. I had to have an honest conversation with myself. I was doubting myself. And whether this would work, because I've just seen somebody else has just said, actually, Lorraine, if you do this, it's going to be much better and much quicker. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, sometimes you just have to have a bit of reflection, and then faith. That's what's worked for me. Jump, Tim, jump. Jump and then test the waters.
Yeah.
What I'm finding that we can do also is we can, tap into, asking the universe, like, show me a sign, if there's something that I'm not quite getting, show me a sign, that's something that I've heard somebody say before. It's like, okay, to put it out there. Well, what else is there for me to, what could more can there be about this, or getting those confirmations, like when you hear something from somebody, when you're just kind of like, I don't know, it's like, but interesting.
Yeah, just don't use Facebook ads for additional confirmation. They're just too in tune to the keystrokes. It's so bizarre. It's like I'll answer an email on my computer, and then I leave and I open my phone, and the first Facebook ad on there is what I answered in my email a few hours before.
It's retargeting. They're very good at that. If you want to do internet marketing, retargeting is the way to go.
They have ways.
Yeah.
It's become a marketing hub.
Yeah, it is actually called retargeting, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. It is very people.
It's creepy. It's like,
yeah.
And my friends are always like, how come you don't have your location settings on? And I'm like, because every time I go into a store like Target, they'll know like my second cousin is about to have a baby in 3 months. The level of their intrusion into my own privacy is just phenomenal. Target stores was one of the most effective with that. So whenever I go into a store, I always make sure my Wi-Fi is turned off, because what I'm thinking about or buying or shopping for is just none of their business.
You're right. Right.
It's an excellent skill to have.
You know everybody's business.
I got goosebumps before, Lorraine, when you said to us that you're going to stop looking outside of yourself for the answers, because I think that's when we start to really move forward. And I think that we really need to have that trust in source and in ourselves. That it's all there. Everything we need is there.
We all need to build that up. At least I do too. So.
Yeah. And I don't mean trusting in our personal physical self, but I mean our higher self. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. So why aren't we acting like it? You know, I say to myself, why don't you just trust that it's all there? It's already there. Just ask for it. And to be able to make that decision to do it, that's just brilliant.
Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of, becoming more aware of expanding our awareness so that we recognize and realize where that other came from. It's sort of like, oh, just like when we started listening to, started studying this material and stuff, it just kind of opened our awareness, expanded our awareness, and, and it's just like, oh, okay. And then the other things aren't quite so dramatic, more controllable.
I get very, I know some people would call it overthink, but I do, for me, this is all very new for me, as you know. So I think and think and think, and then I question a lot. I question myself constantly. And then the answer just appears. Somebody will spring up. Christos the other day, I'm smiling to myself as I'm reading, which isn't going to make sense to anybody that's listening to this recording, so I apologize. But we had a conversation about emotion versus feelings and the difference between the two. And, that still baffles me. I'm still trying to, and Christos is like, stick with it, you'll get there. And I will. So I've, typed up something to send to him today. And then it came up in the reading today. And I'm just like, it's all there. There is a way. I don't just come off the calls, you have to, it's a constant. That's the thing I've realized with this. I, the calmness of mind chapter that I was writing out, I stopped after 20 days, and then confusion reigned again. Like, this is like a constant way of life. It's not something that you think, I've got this now and I don't need to do anymore. I don't need to do anymore. Tim, that's actually what I thought. I truly thought, that's it, I know it now. So I just need to think, I need to change my thoughts, and then everything will be all right. But it's just not that simple. It literally has to be, it's work, isn't it? It's hard work to think sometimes. I enjoy it. I'm having a great time, despite the lows sometimes. I'm having a really great time. But it is something that I come off the calls and I'm thinking constantly, or I'm asking myself questions constantly, or I'm throwing something in the Skype chat to just ask for help, to figure things out. It's an amazing journey. It really, really is. But sometimes I think if you just hear it and don't act on it, or you don't give it any more thought, it's not going to work. It's not going to do you any good, right?
Exactly.
Yes, I wasn't laughing at you, Lorraine. I was laughing at me. No, I was laughing at me because of my propensity to do exactly the same thing.
To just think it's okay. I've mastered this.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I allowed myself to allow. On to the next big thing.
Yeah. That's been one of the most the biggest learnings, the fact that we never stop learning. It's not like school where you go for a couple of years, you get it and you're done. And I understand, obviously, there's been a lot, habits have been built up over a long period of time, so it's going to take a long period of time to change those habits. But yeah, it's like, wow. How long have you guys been studying this material, if that's not too personal? That was a big sigh.
Yeah.
Was that too long? For myself, Lorraine, it's only been about 9 months, although I was exposed to some of Napoleon Hill's writings a couple of decades ago, but I went on to brighter and shinier things because I knew better.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, I did the same thing about 20 years ago. I read Think and Grow Rich, and I'll just say I read it because I just did read it. And I was also looking into Dennis Waitley and a couple of other ones. I read As Man Thinketh and thought it was nice. And then about 3 years ago, I started studying night and day. And I just can't stop myself.
Yeah.
It's like an obsession.
Well, especially when so much good comes of it. That's, I think, for me, that was one of the things I thought to myself today. This is like, I did have a little beat myself up moment. Like, why did I stop writing in the book? Like, it was working. Everything was great, but, come on, Lorraine, if something works, why do you stop? And I wouldn't say I beat myself up terribly, because I've learned to be kind to myself again through this material. I've learned to be kind to myself, and to accept paradigm that is, and move on. But it works, and I've benefited so greatly, and I enjoy it. I truly do.
Yeah, and my motives have changed a little bit as I've gone through. Like, I went through the stage of, I want to have a successful business and I want to make myself better. I'm still on both of those, but also moved into, I want to connect with my spiritual self and be a fuller person in that sense of things. I want to really understand the spiritual side of things and have a real connection and be able to really communicate. Like, it's here in black and white. We have that communication, and I'm getting the hunches and I'm getting the moments of clarity, but I don't want them to be moments. I want them to be at will. Yeah. So that's now what I'm working towards.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
And the best time that I receive those are as soon as I wake up in the morning. I try to just not move and just stay there for a little bit, and that's generally when especially if I've been focusing on something the day before, that's when I'll start to get some clarity around some things.
You tap into source. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
And it's kind of weird to say that, like, even with you guys who understand it and know it to be true, it's still weird to say that out loud and not feel like someone's going to think you're in the loony bin.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the voice, but I'm not hearing it actually. It's just like a knowing.
Oh, I get that. A knowing. Yeah. It's amazing.
So yeah, fun journey. I'm really loving it. And I don't know how important it is for us to learn about the brain. I guess for the fact of our subconscious mind and our limiting beliefs and habits that we have that we need to mould to send the right message. It's important in that respect, but I don't think that we need to really understand how it works biologically to a huge extent. I mean, knowing about neural pathways and things like that's probably beneficial, because then you can understand why if you don't do something that you don't want to do, the neural pathway will get weaker. And if you make yourself do something, even though it's going to be really, really hard for a while, it's going to get easier because the neural pathway is going to get stronger. I think having that understanding gives you a sense of relief, because you know that if I just keep doing it for a little bit longer, I'll get to the tipping point and then it'll be easier. And the other one, I won't be drawn to doing that so much because it'll be weaker. So I think that knowing that is beneficial.
I think in our everyday language, it's much more common for us to differentiate between the mind and the brain than what it was when Napoleon Hill wrote this. And it's quite conceivable that he titled this chapter as The Brain, but his subject matter is more attuned to what we would call the mind.
Yeah.
So much less physiological processes, much more feeling and emotive content.
Yep.
So Lorraine, when you were speaking with Christos about feelings versus emotions, the thought came into my head that it was about emotions are what we can use to describe or keep track of outside of ourselves, or how others will describe certain states of physiological sensation, maybe. And feelings are more of an individual journey, particular and specific to each one of us.
Okay, can put that in a... Christos isn't going to believe this. I've got the answer. Sorry. He's going to be like, well done, Lorraine. No, so, Tim, it's exactly what we were saying. So, because we got emotion is a state. That's where we got to. Because he'd asked me a question. And I was like, the emotion was like, I described it like a state, but I can't articulate it. I can't quite say what it is that I mean. Like, a feeling is, I am happy today, but that's not necessarily the emotion, right? So what then is the emotion? So when I say it like that, in a sentence like that, that's what causes the confusion. I've got this big paragraph that I've got ready to send to Christos. Like, I woke up, I went to sleep on this, and I woke up with a memory of something that had happened in a few years past, and I was quite upset by something. I was being embraced, or more likely restrained, by my then partner. Now, I can't recall what the situation was, but I remember saying, I was trying to get away, and he was saying, Lorraine, no, you're far too emotional. But that thought came to me today, because I was very emotional. That was the state that I was in. But I would have described myself as being upset. Is there a difference between those two? And if there is, what is that?
That would be the challenge of having a partner and communicating with the same language. If you don't speak one another's language, there's going to be big problems.
I know, but I do mean, yeah, God. But I mean, like, just in terms of the feeling that I was feeling, that I would use to describe it. But the emotion itself is bigger. The emotion was bigger. Emotion is bigger than a feeling, right? Am I confusing you guys?
I haven't actually looked into this, and I think I'm going to have to, because it keeps coming up. Because I didn't see really an importance to differentiate between a feeling and an emotion, but perhaps there is.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, there is a difference. Well, says Christos, I believe him. So, but he says, emotions are like thoughts. So you can be an observer or you could be a follower, but it's not. Emotions are not necessarily just a feeling. So there is a differentiator, whatever, between the two.
My brain is kind of swimming now, because what I said to you, Lorraine, I'm trying to figure out, okay, where did I get that? Would it, be a description of emotions, maybe more of a clinical term that we can describe across people as that we share in common, versus a feeling the specific feeling as one individual would operationally define it is totally different, or can be totally different from individual to individual. But then when Nicole was speaking, I looked over at one of my NLP books and I thought, well, did I get that in from Neuro-Linguistic Programming and describing what NLP is, or did I get it from a psychology textbook, or where did I get that idea?
Well, Christos, what he says is, he says a feeling, so if you say feel happy or you sad, that describes an emotional state that you're in. But it describes the emotional state, but the emotion is actually different. I don't quite know.
I'm tending to lean towards what Tim just said, and that's what I was kind of thinking, that everyone feels the emotion of happy differently.
Right, okay.
So I don't know, I'm just guessing. I'd need to look into it, but yeah.
And I'm not doing him any justice. He's going to have to call him live. Christos is going to have to say, excuse Lorraine. This is what I actually said. Because I've probably got it all wrong. It doesn't help. Yeah, I'm confusing it all. But yeah, maybe we feel. I don't know. I'm going to get there though. Christos will explain it to us.
It's a journey, maybe not so much a destination, Lorraine.
Perhaps. And perhaps, and it might not. And it's not like it's just something that had come up. So, and he mentioned something, and I was like, what? So I need to dig further into that, just because, he made a comment about something, and I wanted to dig. So, but you said it keeps coming up, Nicole. So some other people have said it, have they?
Mainly Christos.
he's priming the mastermind group. I think where I differentiate between feelings and emotions, it's been shaped by an online course that I'm taking. There's a group called Berkeley 101 GG Happiness Course on Facebook, and the website is edx.org. There's all kinds of free university level courses that you can take, and you can pay for a certificate or not pay for a certificate, but they're basically university levels of massive open online courses. And it's a happiness course. They teach it in the classrooms at Berkeley in California. And I probably...
A happiness course, did you say?
Yeah. Oh. And I probably got that concept or that definition as I described the difference between feelings and emotions. Some of it probably came from there.
I've joined that course, so I'll let you know.
Have you?
Yes.
A happiness course? I'm intrigued. Well, I can't wait. I'll be, I'll check. How long have you been on the course, Tim? You always seem pretty happy to me.
Thank you. Let's see, 6 months or so. I need to finish it by June, or I'll have to start over, which won't be the end of the world. It's go at your own pace, and there's always something else that comes up when if it's not a course that you've paid for and you have to attend at a certain day and time. It's easy to say, oh, well, that's important, but this is more important right now.
Yeah, I'm quite sure I have to finish at the same time, and even though I've just started. So I better get my act together.
It's an hour to 2 hours of focused effort per week, basically.
Yeah.
On being happy.
No, it's not so much on being happy. It's broad and comprehensive. A big element is being able to. The course begins by basically going through history and describing differences between the feelings of happy and the description of the emotions of joy, as an example.
That's exactly. That's perfect. Christos wrote that course. It says, he says, the feeling describes that you're in an emotional state, and the emotion is the state that you're in. That's exactly what he would say. Yeah, there you go. I don't know the answer. Perhaps I should do the course.
So feelings are adjectives for a noun.
They
which is
describe the
emotion.
emotional state you're in. They describe an emotional state, and the emotion is the state that you're in. So I'm sad describes an emotional state, and the emotion itself is that state. That's how he would be in a nutshell.
So would it be different if I were to say, I feel sad versus I am sad?
Maybe.
It's a different energy.
Maybe. Christos is just leaving me breadcrumbs. He's not giving me the answer yet. Maybe.
What was this about, looking outside yourself for answers, Lorraine?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to blow him away with that one, though. He's going to be so impressed.
But that's interesting what Callie said, the connotation of the energy level, or possibly the magnitude of it, or the persistence of it is there's a difference that we assume between I feel sad tends to describe it as a temporal feeling that it's going to pass, versus I am sad to describe it as an ongoing state that we may not be able to step out of as easily.
I think that's exactly it.
Yes.
Nicole, you're not convinced, no?
I'm pondering. I'm kind of thinking along the lines of, and I don't want to insult anyone, so along the lines of, is it just a technicality, or is it something that it would be really beneficial to understand? Well, in the self-talk aspect, definitely. You don't want to be saying I am sad, because it's not.
No, it's not something. It's not part of our essence. But whereas anything that's associated with I am, it's claiming as part of you. Well, of course we have feelings that are part of us, but they are subject to change. The moods, they're subject to change based on all the different kind of stimuli that that's going on internally and externally.
I was thinking more in terms of what others' perceptions of it would be from a communication style, versus saying I feel successful versus I am successful.
Okay. I feel successful and I am successful are still a little bit different, but yet they're it's both a positive. True.
You would definitely be wanting to use I am successful if you were using that, to train yourself.
Oh, for the self-talk and the training the subconscious, absolutely.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about the language of emotions, there's this wonderful book of this author. This book on language, the art of language, by this person who, let me find out who she is. She's name I think is Carla Mick. I'll find out who that is. Anyway, it's about the language of emotions, and there's a whole thing about the different emotions or the different feelings, what it can possibly mean, what's behind it. That's why it's such a big. It's understanding the language of feelings, understanding the language of our emotions.
And it is a really important subject, because it's the emotion that steps up the thought vibration to be able to send it out to the ether, and that steps up our own vibration to be able to receive. So we really should understand a bit about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what he was saying. You need to get that bit. He did give us, I remember before, he had given us an example. Remember when we were in the other masterminding group? And he said, imagine you're stepping on a nail. Your immediate response is to exclaim out loud because you're in pain. Pain is the feeling. Mm-hmm. So if you go back and think what happened, you begin to step on the nail begins to break the skin surface and travel into your foot, and you realize this and feel pain. But that's a feeling. That's not necessarily the emotion.
Oh, so it's the more physical aspect. So, because like Kelly was saying earlier, you might feel nervousness in your stomach, or, you know, you feel emotion in your body, actually. So, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he said he did say this is his own interpretation. This is what he said. Bear in mind, this is my interpretation.
His interpretation.
Yeah, is the nail entering the foot and being present. You don't have to accept the pain. Whatever. Did I just blow you away? We had it there, and I just ruined it with the other bit. But it's that's a good point though, because actually he hasn't always separated it. But it is something. Yeah, I'm gonna stop.
Well, for communication styles, when you talk about stepping on a nail, I thought, oh, okay, feelings require loud profanity, and emotion is a more socially acceptable way of communicating it.
Yeah, that was yeah. It's actually quite interesting because it baffled me for a long time, because there are feelings of, like you said, the nail in the foot, that's physical, but you've got anger, sadness, pain, joy. He was saying you can let go of those feelings. You can let go. I think that's what he was trying to convey. You can let go of that. Then where does the emotion bit come into it?
Well, something else that I heard recently is that emotion is triggered by a release of chemical.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas a feeling, maybe not. Maybe a combination of feelings would produce a release of the chemical to create the emotion.
Mm.
Because you could have 5 different feelings that make up excitement, eager anticipation.
Yeah.
You know, I can't, but you understand what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So in reality, we should be able to brainstorm this and come up with what the answer is.
Yeah, we should really, because it is yeah, like to your point, it's quite important because we need that. We need to understand that. And yet here we are.
And I would have to say, here we were, because I need to get going, and I am incredibly grateful for the 3 of you ladies participating on this call this afternoon or morning.
And thank you too. I appreciate all of you being here. It's always fun.
You too.
Yeah, and I just found that book. It's called The Language of Emotions, What Your Feelings Are Trying to Tell You by Carla McLaren.
Does that have the answer?
Stop looking, Lorraine. Start reading.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've got to go inside again. I've got to go inside. You guys take care, Tim.
Yes, you ladies have a wonderful afternoon and a terrific rest of your day. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, everyone.
Later this week.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you.